Alrighty, hello. So today we are going to look at this thing called algebra, and I'm going to introduce you to it. You may actually know what algebra is already, or you may at least know that there's x's and y's and equal signs and numbers and all sorts of other things in there. We're going to start pretty simple. And you'll notice that there's hello in lots of different languages here. That is because one point I want to emphasize today is that algebra is a language. It is a language. Okay. So maths in general is a language. And you can sometimes translate English to maths. Now, not all English, but let's look at a particular example to see what I mean by that. Let's say that you had $14 and you spent $5 on a falafel kebab and you had $9 left. How do you write that down in mathematical language? You probably already know how to do that. So just pause the video, write it down, and let's see whether you got the right answer. So if you wrote down 14 minus 5 equals 9, yes, you did get the right answer. If not, that's what it is. So that's how we write it down. We had $14, we spent 5, so we lost $5, and the result was 9, we had $9 left. All right, so in algebra, there's this thing called unknowns. So when we move from this to the next stage, we start introducing algebra. So let's say you don't know all the pieces of information in this picture. And let's say you had $14 and you spent some amount of money, but you don't remember how much it was on a falafel kebab. And you've checked and you have $9 left. So if you can write that using a blank space, we're getting a little bit closer to algebra. So just pause the video, see if you can do that. Okay, did you get this? 14 minus blank equals 9. And when I teach this in class, some people actually do write 14 minus x, or they put a letter here. And that's actually one step ahead. But if you didn't do that, that's fine. Because I asked you to do a blank space. 14 minus blank, we don't know what this is. Equals 9. Right. Okay, so, and as I just said, or mentioned, you can, instead of writing the blank space, you can write a letter. And that letter is the thing that we don't know. More specifically, it's the number that we don't know. So this letter is called an unknown, and it stands for a number that we don't know because we don't remember how much we spent. And F is not a falafel kebab. We have to be very careful about that. F doesn't represent the falafel kebab. And the way you can remember that is if you translate this back to English, it can't be $14 minus a falafel kebab equals $9. That doesn't make sense, does it? But if you say it's the price of the falafel kebab, if you say, okay, this F is not talking about the kebab, it's talking about the price, which is a number, it makes more sense. $14 minus however much the falafel kebab cost, the price of the kebab, equals 9. Okay? So these unknowns are always talking about a number. They're always representing a number of some sort that we don't know. Okay. By the way, you'll need to know this as well. So we're getting you used to the idea of the language of algebra, and so there's some words that you need to know. One of those words is unknowns, which we've just talked about. Another one is pronumeral. So pronumeral, you have a pronumeral whenever you write a letter instead of a number. That's what a pronumeral is. It's a letter that's written instead of a number. And there's different types of pronumerals. Some are called unknowns. So the one we just did is actually a type of pronumeral where we don't actually know the number because we didn't know the price of the kebab. Another one is variable. And there's another one called parameter, but you won't learn that until much later, I would think. Okay, so what we're looking at now is unknown is a type of pronumeral. Alrighty. Okay, an expression. Here we've got to go through some more words just so that we are talking about the same thing when we're talking about algebra. So an expression is a combination of numbers, pronumerals, and operators. Numbers, pronumerals, and operators are plus, minus, times, and divide. So an example of an expression, 3 plus z, or 2 divided by y, or 5 times x plus a. And by the way, you can actually write these two slightly different ways. You can write 2 divided by y as 2 over y. That's the same thing. And 5 times x you can write as 5x plus a. This is called a term. We'll get back to that later. Now, the only difference between an equation and an expression, or the most important difference, or the difference, is that the equation has an equal sign. So you'll notice that the word equation starts with equa, which is the same as the start of the word equals. So hopefully that makes sense. So if I add equals 10, this is now an equation. Instead of an expression, now it's back to an expression. All right. So, Kamil from Kamil's Kebabs, Kamil himself has a chat to you over the counter, and he says it is costing too much these days to make falafel balls. It costs $2 per falafel ball to make. It costs $2 for every falafel ball. So if we say the number of falafel balls is B, how do we write in algebra, how do we write the cost of those falafel balls? This is a pretty tricky one. So I'll get you to have a think about that just for a second and pause the video. All right, hopefully you didn't think for 5 or 10 minutes if you didn't know. Let's get on to it. If the number of falafel balls is B, how do we write the cost of those falafel balls? So if I have one falafel ball, if B is 1, then the cost is $2, right? If I have 2 falafel balls, so if that's 1, if I have 2 falafel balls, the cost is $4, isn't it? So I got $2 and another $2. If I have 3 falafel balls, the cost is $6. So it's sometimes helpful to draw these tables when you're writing, when you're doing some translation, because it can be hard to come up with a translation between English and maths. So if it costs $2 per falafel ball to make, what's happening really is this is B, right? The number of falafel balls, and this is the cost. Well, the cost is always 2 times B, isn't it? So it's always 2 times B. So that's how we write it down. That is the cost of the falafel balls. All right. Now, remember before we said we can write 2 times B as 2B, and I said briefly that this is a term. Okay. So I just want to draw this out for you. Look at this 2B in detail. This whole thing is called a term. Remember the B is a pronumeral, and the number multiplying the pronumeral, so this 2 times B, this number over here is always called a coefficient. So if I have 3x, if I have 279z, then this is a coefficient, and this is a coefficient. and that's a pronumeral, and that's a pronumeral. Okay, so I think is that enough for today? That is enough. Let's just do this. If you understand everything and you're ready to go, then you don't have to stick around for this bit, but let's just do it. X plus 3. So the term, there's no terms here. Expressions, that's an expression. This whole thing is an expression. That's an expression. So expression, and then for terms, this is a term, and this is a term, isn't it? Because you've got the coefficient and the pronumeral, number times a letter, and a number times a letter. That's a term. By the way, this is also a term here. X3, that's a term, and 12 is a term as well. So it doesn't just have to be a number times a letter. It could just be a number or a letter. They're all terms. Okay, so what is the coefficient of each term? 45 is the coefficient here. 3 is the coefficient here. And when you've got x on its own, what is the coefficient of x? That's a tricky one. You might say there is no coefficient. But actually, we kind of say there is a coefficient here, and this will be useful later on. The coefficient is actually 1. Why is that? Because x is the same as 1 times x, isn't it? If I times something by 1, it just stays the same. So these two things are the same as each other, which means that's 1x. So the coefficient really of this is 1. All right. That is enough for today. We'll move on to further discussions with Kamil later on, and I'll see you next time.